To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. As always, the meeting is being recorded on Jam TV, and the recording will be available a few days after the meeting, instantly. And there's also a Zoom connection for the meeting, which you can find on the district website and also as part of the agenda. There's a link as well. Public comment will occur during the public comment portion of the meeting and is done by either raising your hand remotely on Zoom or in person. And during the public comment, once you're acknowledged, state your name and ward so that you can be included in the minutes, and please limit your time to 3 minutes. Public comment is governed by policy BEDH. Joanne, do you have any additions or deletions to the agenda?
I don't. BEDH might not have been updated, so if people were here last meeting, just let me know if there's other changes or anything that needs to be done. Thank you.
Lil, is there any correspondence for tonight?
There is, yes, there is. Can we come back in just a couple minutes? Because it's not coming up on my screen.
Sure, we'll circle back after
Thank you.
public comment.
Thank you.
Okay, while waiting for the correspondence, we'll now open public comment period for policy BEDH. I don't see anyone in the room for public comment, so is there anyone on Zoom?
No hands are raised.
I also should mention that board members Kristen O'Rourke and Wendy Hall are participating tonight via Zoom. Yep, Lil?
Yes, there were several pieces of correspondence from Tom Harkins asking us to look into policy KFR regarding the use of the building for community purposes and the fee schedule for that.
Okay, thank you. And I'm assuming are there any hands raised now for public comment? Nope, okay. So the public comment portion of the meeting is now closed, and we will now move on to, I need a motion to approve the public minutes from January 11th, 2023.
I'll make a motion to approve the public minutes from January 11th, 2023.
Okay, the motion made by Lil, seconded by Stephen. Are there any comments or corrections?
They were super thorough and great. Thank you. I appreciate thorough minutes.
Do Kristen or Wendy have any comments or corrections?
Not hearing any.
None. No, I agree. That's very good.
Okay, I just had two. It looked like we had Stephen reading 2 of the warrant articles, and I didn't think you were reading 2. So under 8C, I had Stephen reading the Lebanon Support Staff Collective Bargaining Agreement, and then it looked like again you're reading the Lebanon Administrative Assistant Association Collective Bargaining Agreement. So
I'm happy to do either one.
I think we had volunteers for each one. So does someone remember which one they volunteered for?
Which one are you asking about?
I think Stephen was probably doing the Lebanon Support Staff one, so it was probably
I had Lil.
the administrative assistant.
That was me.
Okay, so if we could change 8E to Lil Mon. And then my other comment was under 8F, that should be 600,000, and it looks like it's closer to 6 million.
Inflation.
I wish we had 6 million, but that would solve a lot of problems. Okay, anybody else have any comments or corrections? Okay, hearing none, we'll have to take a roll call vote because we have 2 members attending via Zoom. So, Lisa?
Yes.
Lil?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Wendy,
Yes.
Kristen,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. The motion passes 8-0. Okay, can I have a motion to approve the nominations, renominations, and acknowledge the resignations or retirements included in the packet?
I'll make a motion to approve the nominations and resignations for January 25th, 2023.
I'll second it.
So that was a motion by Lil, seconded by Stephen. Anybody, or Joanne, do you have any comments about any of these?
I do not.
Anybody have any questions?
I had a quick question, if you can hear me.
Yep, go ahead, Kristen.
Yeah, I just wondered, it looks like we're losing Madame Menard to retirement, and I know she teaches a couple of classes, so I'm just wondering, and also the French teacher at LMS, so are those positions filled already for next year or in progress?
So Nancy's a retirement, so that would be next year. I do know that the middle school position was posted. I was just talking to Colleen today. Tim, do you know if that's filled?
I do not believe it is, but they have made
Applicants.
plans to
Okay.
cover the position until it's filled.
Okay. Thank you.
Plans to cover it from inside of with the other teachers, you mean?
I don't know the details, but either that or long-term sub, but they have a media plan while it's posted. We don't have a permanent replacement yet.
Okay, any other questions? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Lisa?
Yes.
Lil?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Wendy?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Motion passes 8-0. Okay, moving on. Do we have a student report? I thought I saw him here. Did he leave?
Okay.
Okay. So we will not have a student report this evening. Moving on to SAU leadership team update, the superintendent update.
Sure, I'm just trying to find the page. So, update on the renovation projects. We continue to meet every 2 weeks, and the Mountain Lake project is moving right along and looks great. The bids are going out for the high school, Hanover Street School. We should be getting those bids back in February, so it'll be interesting to see what the numbers are like when they come in. As far as policies, I reviewed and drafted some policies, some of which are in this packet. Board and FNF agendas. Mel is here, which is great, so we hired a new minute taker. We reviewed the warrant articles and sought legal counsel for deliberative session. Communications with Karen Woolsey, Jane Rice, and Aaron Mills regarding special education issues. Communication with Mr. Smith and Mr. Stone regarding football, we're going to talk about tonight. Meeting with Cornish regarding non-area resident contracts, so student contracts. Met with LSS representatives, including personnel matters. Meetings with Karen Dubois, who's onboarding very well, doing her work. Meeting with Miranda Collins, our district social worker, regarding staff and student reports. The SALT team participated in a multiple-hour Homeland Emergencies drill based on reunification, and tomorrow we have SALT, and we're going to pick up based on things that we talked about there and talk about that at SALT. Scheduled principal meetings. I actually met with Ian, Colleen, and Jack today. Communications with City Manager Sean Mulholland, the Lebanon Police Department. So his name happens to be Chief Roberts, but there's no relation there. Lebanon Parks and Rec, Nick Coates, to talk about school city matters. We have a meeting tomorrow night for those people on the board for the Joint Task Force. And so we're going to pick up with some of the traffic patterns and talk about what we can do to problem solve that. Legal counsel conferred with me in regard to personnel and student matters. There are quite a few principals connecting with me as well. I also wanted to have, as part of this update, Ian and Mike to talk about football as well as ice hockey, but are there any questions for me prior to having them come up and talk about those two topics? Great. Thank you.
Joanne?
Yeah. Oh, Wendy.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So one, in your piece of paper that you put in the pocket, should it be Paul Coates versus Nick Coates?
No.
Okay. Is there somebody new at the recreation?
I've been emailing back and forth with Nick.
Okay. And I was just curious, what school city matters? Can you share more about what things you're talking about?
Just that, like the crossing walk in front of Seminary Hill.
Okay.
Can be pretty dark. So can we do maybe the solar blinking lights, or can we do something along those lines to try to emphasize that? There's certain areas that, just because of where we live in the hills and the sunlight, it's hard to see. So I'm trying to figure out with the city what we might be able to do for those spots.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
I just have a quick question, too. Can you just kind of refresh our memory about the K-6 math pilot? Is that something that's actually started right now, or something that's going to be implemented in the fall?
Sure. There are two different programs that they are piloting this year. So they're in the second half. Those teachers who are a part of the pilot are doing the second pilot now. They're going to be meeting over the next month or so and determining which of the two programs to go forward with. And then I'll be, I don't know if Kevin or Karen will present it, but I'll present it to the board along with some of the teachers so they can talk about why they're selecting this framework. And then I want to get out ahead of it in ordering it. I want to get it in the hands of the teachers this summer so they can look at it and they feel comfortable with it. There's nothing worse than starting school and then not having had your hands on what you're going to teach. And there's delays in construction, and there's also delays in textbooks and things like that. So that's kind of the flow for the year. So it should be piloted in place next fall.
Okay.
Thank you. Mike and Ian, do you want to talk about football and then ice hockey, please? Thanks for being here tonight.
Yes. Hello. So Ian Smith, principal of the high school. First, we want to acknowledge that moving to a JV schedule was not a decision that we were eager to make. We knew that there would be others out there that disagreed, that resented the decision, and we feel bad about that. And we acknowledge that it was difficult news to hear for some. We support Lebanon High School football. We want a strong football program. It's important to us. We understand that it's often an event that the community looks forward to attending on Fridays, and we hope to, we don't hope to, we're going to have a Division II football team, not next year, but the year after, to play a varsity schedule. I just want to give you a little bit of information. You've received the letters that we sent to the community. You received a letter, at least I think 2 weeks ago, explaining the process that we undertook to get to where we're at now. There was an article in the paper on Saturday, which some of you might have read. We looked at the numbers. Mike met with the team. He watched tape, hours of tape, talked to our new head coach, Doug Johnson, who we're excited to have on board. He talked to the NHIA and other Division II athletic directors. We looked at the possibility of moving to Division III. We thought that might be a good kind of middle ground, and that wasn't an option. As I explained in the letter that we sent. We wish it was. A decision had to be made, and we understood a decision had to be made sooner rather than later. We can't wait and leave these other teams in limbo that we're playing against and wait until summer, the end of spring, to determine whether or not we have a program that's competitive at the varsity level. So we made the decision on a timeline that we thought made sense. We regret that some of the information got out in front of us a bit, and that parents and students found out about it before we were able to tell them at our scheduled meeting. But that's the way it goes sometimes, and it's not ideal, and we are sorry for that. We're excited about the numbers, and so these are the things that we have thought about. We wished it wasn't an easy decision to make, but I think we're excited about the future of the program. We're excited about the numbers at the lower level. There's good coaching there. We have a coach in place that we think will create good relationships with kids and move the program forward. You got an update, I believe, on who the new head coach is. He's a 1977 graduate of Lebanon High School. He's coached collegiately and at the high school level. He played college football at Tufts University. He's been at our games, he's been in our weight room, and we are glad to have him on board. Yeah, in the end, this is a stopgap measure. Not ideal, but we feel it's necessary. Mike has coached, it's his life's work, college and high school football for 40 plus years. I don't need to tell anyone about Mike's reputation in regard to football. So we knew that some criticism would come our way, and again, not ideal, but that's the way it goes. And we are comfortable with the decision. We did it to keep kids safe, to keep kids coming back the next day to compete at practice, and to have some success when they compete with other teams. And so we're happy to answer questions that you might have. Yeah.
Stephen?
I would just like to say thank you to both of you for keeping our kids safe. I mean, that's clearly the focus of this decision, so thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I have a question. It's Wendy.
Go ahead, Wendy.
So Ian, I also think it's the right decision, and I'm grateful that you guys made that decision. My question is, and this is looking forward, but what kinds of things will you be evaluating to determine whether we're ready to go back to a varsity level team? You know, what kinds of numbers are you thinking make a viable football program sort of for long-term consideration? And my last question would be, you know, do we have some sense of what our football program actually cost us?
We'll start with the program itself. The first thing we need to do, as you guys have actually complimented us on, is we want to keep our kids safe. So I look at the safety, our physical maturity at this time, our numbers, and then obviously we want to try to achieve some moniker of success. It's not just wins and losses. So when we look at what our football program is going to look like down the road, yes, we've done our homework about who's coming along. What we're trying to do is take what we have we have 12 freshmen and 4 sophomores, and we hope to get them an extra year so that in their junior and senior year, there'll be 10 folks that are coming in behind them and 10 folks that are coming in behind them. That's what the numbers say. Hopefully, if we achieve success and have some success on the field, we'll continue to have some interest in the program, and we'll have numbers that are in the 30s and 40s. And that's where I think we need to be if we're going to compete year in and year out in Division II. If it doesn't happen, I mean, we've done it before. The first year I was here, last game I went to, we went over to Plymouth with 19 players. It's not unheard of. Depends on who those 19 are and what their physical ability and what their physical maturity, more importantly, looks like, and what grade they're in, how much experience have they had at the varsity level. It's a little quicker than a freshman game. So that's why I think it's the best move for us. In terms of how much it costs, yeah, we have a real good idea of what it costs. I can break it down for you by every line item that we have in our budget, if you'd like. I can tell you this, that it's not the most expensive program we have, and it's very close in the top 5 programs that we have. If you figure in transportation and everything else, it's right there with the top 5 folks, or top 5 programs that we have now in existence.
Top 5 for expense or top 5 for in participation?
Oh, no, expense.
Okay.
In terms of, if you want specific numbers, I can share that with you.
I was just looking for just a round number generally. You know, I don't need line item by line item. I was just curious because we never look at the athletic budget separate from anything, so I was just curious.
Yeah, it's, if you need a number, with transportation and everything else, it's about $26,000 a year.
What are the other 4 programs that are up with football?
Let's see. Boys and girls ice hockey, football, girls and boys basketball, and Nordic. Those are the top 6 programs. A lot of that has to do with transportation costs, though.
Yeah. Ready for ice hockey? Any more questions for football?
I just want to share one piece from, we have 598 students currently. We fluctuate anywhere from 585 at the lowest, this is information that we've given in the past 7 years, 585 up to 622 or so. We're supposed to have 630 plus kids 3 years from now, but that still puts us at the very bottom of Division II as far as numbers go. We have many more sports now than we had 20 years ago, 25 years ago. We also had 30 more kids per class. And that, if, for instance, you go back to 1999, we had 181 kids in that class. Now we average about 150. Students have choices. To keep a vigorous program of 35 plus student athletes in the football program is hard to do, even in the best of times. But we really feel that that maybe we can create some momentum. Losing a longtime coach hasn't helped. And that's the nature of programs, and we've experienced that in other places in our athletic program as well. So we do the best we can to find the best coach possible, and Mike spends hours trying to figure out that process of who is going to lead these teams. Whereas 25 years ago, it was competitive, multiple applicants for JV positions. No, not anymore.
Ice hockey?
We co-op on the boys' side and the girls' side with each of them with 3 schools. The sport, and every 2 years, you have to renew your co-op. We've done that, but we're not going to do that with our boys' program simply because Mount Royal, and we've already had conversations with Mount Royal and the head of school, they have one player who is a junior, and we're going to fulfill our commitment to that young man, but they don't have anybody else coming along until 4 or 5 years down the road. So we've agreed that after that commitment's over with, that we're going to drop Mount Royal and try to find someone else if it's out there. While we were doing that, we were approached by Mascoma, who has apparently some numbers in the lower level hockey. And so what we did is write a letter to the NHIA asking them for permission to have Mascoma join us for 1 year, being next year, and then drop Mount Royal and again be a 3-team co-op. So what I'm asking from you tonight is if the NHIA agrees to that, generally speaking, we need your permission to do that, to have a 4-team co-op and to change the teams in the co-op. The reasoning behind this is there's a timetable for renewals, and it's coming up this year. We just happened to make a contract with Mount Royal in the odd year, and we're going to honor that commitment, even if to that young man it's the right thing to do. But we at the same time, if Mascoma doesn't, if they're not allowed to join us, they're going to go somewhere else, and so we'll be looking for a 3rd team down the road at some point. So that kind of the timeline is tomorrow morning the NHIA is meeting, and the hockey committee is meeting. We've submitted a letter from all the principals, all the ADs from the 4 schools, and hopefully it'll be okay. We're not holding our breath. Their bylaws say 3 teams only, so but maybe.
So you're going to try and keep Mount Royal and bring Mascoma in?
Yes, we're going to try to honor the commitment to that young man.
Got it.
And still be able to have a program or a school join us that we know has people that are interested in playing hockey down the road for 3 or 4 years.
Got it.
Any other questions?
So you're thinking the likelihood is not high.
Well, everybody, yeah.
Okay.
But we'll see, we'll see.
Okay.
Mike, I have a quick question. The Mascoma hockey players, are they used to playing with our hockey players already on club teams before they get to high school?
Yes, that's part of the draw. A lot of the young men that are playing they grow up together and they play in the same leagues. And then I guess when we get to high school, Mascoma right now has nowhere to go. They've got at least four people that will join somebody next year that are aren't going to be able to play hockey if they don't find a home for them to play.
So would you like us to vote on that?
Yes.
Make a motion, Mary. Make a motion.
Yeah, make a motion, Mary.
Let's see. I make a motion that our team go for a 4-school hockey team.
If allowed, right?
Yeah, if allowed.
Said the boys hockey team.
Boys, yes, sorry.
Okay, motion made by Mary. Do I have a second? Stephen, second. Any more discussion?
Let's hope.
Okay.
Mike,
Right.
Mike, can I just ask one more question? So if NHIAA comes back and says that it can only be 3 teams, would we really give up the opportunity with Mascoma to keep the commitment to the one player, or would we encourage,
Yes, I feel pretty strongly about that. I don't
Okay.
think anybody, we made a commitment to them. He's been with us, and his family's been with us he's been with us for 3 years. I don't think it's the right thing to do. The contract reads until next year anyway, so we'd have to break the contract, and on top of that, I don't think it's the right thing to do
Break is hard.
for the young man. We'll figure it out. If it's not Mascoma, we'll figure it out, but I think that's the right thing to do.
Any more questions? Okay, we'll call the vote. Lisa?
Yes.
Lil?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Wendy?
yes?
Kristen?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. The motion passes 8-0.
Thank you. Drive safe. See you tomorrow.
Moving on to the business administrator update. Tim?
I put in your packet the documents I'll be asking you to sign tomorrow via PandaDoc. It's same information we've been talking about, the default, and then the MS-26 is the actual numbers for the budget. The one thing I wanted to point out today is the warrant, and I would love to have a motion and approval of this warrant. The difference between this warrant and what we talked about last time is I broke up the special meeting articles for the CBAs. When we put it together last week, we put them all into one article. I sent it to DRA and I sent it to our lawyers, and our lawyers recommended pretty strongly that you have one for each CBA. Notably, he said it seemed legal the way it was, but with that, it's basically all or nothing for all 3 CBAs, and that's probably not the approach to take. So that's the way I structured it and submitted it to the DRA for their approval, and it's before you that way. So to be, you'd vote on the support staff bargaining agreement and then the special meeting for that. And then the LAG, which is Article 5, and Article 6 is the special meeting for that. Article 7 is the secretaries or the administrative assistants. Article 8 is the special meeting for that. And then Article 9 is now the cap reserve fund article.
And to keep it simple in the deliberative session script, if you were assigned to an article, I'm just having you read the next one right after it.
So it makes for a longer warrant, but based on our lawyer's advice, I do think it's the best way to go is to break it down.
Just anticipating the process at the deliberative session, can you just run through just the logistics of those special meetings for a defeated collective bargaining agreement, exactly what are we asking voters to approve?
At the deliberative session, the warrant's the warrant, so
Yeah.
nothing, they don't approve anything at the deliberative session for those special meeting articles. When they go in the ballot box, they'll vote on whether, if the first one gets defeated, then I want you guys to think about having a special meeting to reconsider it. But at the deliberative session, you're just going to read the intent, but voters don't get to change the wording of an article or take it out. So nothing happens at the deliberative session except someone can make a comment, like, I don't think you should have it in there or whatever, but it's in there already if you approve it tonight.
But then that special meeting that we then call, is that a public meeting, a deliberative session type meeting, or what are the logistics
Yeah,
of that special meeting?
Admittedly, I don't know the mechanics of that. We would, if a warrant article fails and they've approved the special meeting, the first step would be you guys deciding if you wanted to do a special meeting. Well, I guess you'd make that decision based on me coming back to you saying, this is how it works. I can make some assumptions, but I've not researched what happens. I know you guys don't have to have a special meeting if you don't want to. But I don't know the mechanics of, it's another deliberative session, another vote, or just a vote. I don't know for sure. I can make sure I'm armed with that for the deliberative session.
Well, I was just trying to anticipate questions that we might get asked.
Well, also, we'll have an attorney from Drummond Woodsum at the deliberative session. So, no, he has the warrant, so he's hopefully prepared for that, but I won't come ignorant. Yep.
Tim, can I just jump in real fast? This is Kristen. Just on Article 5, it says the school board recommends the article by a vote of 8 yes, 1 no, and 1 abstain.
Yes.
So I think there
That's
were
too
no
many.
abstentions. Yeah, exactly.
I think there
it
was
8
one
yes and 1 no.
abstention. I think
Okay.
Aaron abstained, but I think the
Oh,
no
okay.
vote is probably not correct.
Oh, good catch. That would be 10, and it's not 10 people. It's 8 yes, 1 abstain. Good catch.
And it should be abstention, not abstain.
Abstention?
And Tim, I think the new articles that you put in, there should be parentheses around majority vote required. And you capitalize majority vote required in some, the M, the V, the R, but not in all. So just consistency.
Yes, ma'am. No, I appreciate that. That's good. Yeah. Okay. I will make those changes tomorrow morning. If you guys, I'd love a motion to approve this warrant with the adjustments as noted. And then if you give that motion, then tomorrow morning I'll do it and you'll see it in your inbox.
So would someone like to make a motion?
Can we make one motion to cover approving all of these as written? Or do we
Yes,
do them
I think-
individually?
No, I think you can approve this warrant as written.
Right?
With the amendation.
So I would move that we approve the proposed warrants with the proposed edits as written
Post 2023
for the
warrant?
2023 vote. Yes.
Okay,
I'll second. So motion made by Steven, seconded by Lil. Anybody have any comments or questions?
So we will have because some of us now are reading more articles than we had originally planned, we will have the script, right, with the names of who's doing what, okay.
I drafted it all and have Tim just adding the certain sections that say for more information, and then I'll have them printed for deliberative session.
So Wendy and Kristen, do you have any comments?
None.
Okay, we'll take
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. Lisa?
Yes.
Lil?
Yes.
Steven?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
Wendy?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so the motion passes 8-0.
Thank you. I just, you guys are really good about checking email, but please by tomorrow afternoon, check your email because I have an appointment with our clerk to post these on Friday. The deadline is Monday. I want to get it done this week. So, thank you.
So moving on to unfinished business, we have the second reading of policy BEDH.
I'm wondering if this is supposed to go back to policy based on the last meeting, or I remember listening to the meeting, something about making sure that Plainfield and Grantham residents can also have an opportunity for public comment. So I think I'm supposed to bring this back to policy and then back here, but, and people are shaking yes. So we don't need to take action
Okay.
on this, and I'll bring it to policy.
I've got edits for you anyway, so of
Perfect.
the grammar stuff, so I'll get it to
I
you.
appreciate that, thank you.
I was gonna say, when we bring it back to policy, just that last paragraph, there's also inconsistency about the 15 minutes for public comment when the whole policy is about making public comment 30 minutes. So we just need to double check on that in policy too.
Under letter C?
Yeah.
Yes, the last paragraph, the last sentence of the last paragraph
Oh, I
of
see
C.
that. Thank you. Great, appreciate it.
Okay, under new business, we have the first reading of policy CBI, Superintendent Evaluation and Goal Setting Revised. Kristen, do you have anything you'd like to introduce with that?
Honestly, no, because this hasn't been to policy committee yet. This was just, we talked about it last board meeting, which I think was shortly after our last policy meeting. So, yeah, I mean, Joanne was drafting some of those. I don't know, maybe Joanne, you'd like to throw a few things in there? I think it's probably going to come to policy meeting. Is that correct?
I don't know the answer to that. I wasn't here at the board meeting, so.
Okay, right, yeah, I think it was a little ambiguous because we threw out a lot of things during our discussion when I was just summarizing from our previous board policy meeting, and you drafted a bunch of stuff, which is great, and I think I'm not really sure, Dick might remember better, but he's not at the meeting tonight,
So
why we wanted to bring it forward today.
So I just have a question. So we
Go
have-
ahead, Lil.
Sorry, Kristen, I didn't mean to interrupt you. We have CBI, our current one, and then what we also have the CBI that's draft for Lebanon School Board discussion for today. Did you write this, Joanne? This? Okay.
Yeah, so after the last board meeting, Kristen emailed me and said, Joanne, please create these two policies and bring them to the board. I then had some information from policy language that we use for super eval. So if you look at the superintendent evaluation goal setting, the one that says draft for Lebanon School Board discussion, the first paragraph or so comes from board language that we used like back in it's an odd number, like 2019, I think. Then I pulled paragraph 3 through the number 10, and the board may choose. That information comes from the updated CBI. And then I also believe that bottom paragraph comes from there as well. And then on the second page, I took from super eval, but kind of called them evaluation tools, and wrote those 1, 2, 3s. I put in the timeline, then I did a description of the second tool that could be used, that would be created by the board and the new superintendent. Lil had sent me some information as well, and it was kind of a similar process in that there would be some kind of ranking scale, open-ended questions, as well as opportunities for interviews again. So I just want to give you like where I pulled the pieces from. So some of the things I put in, and remember, I just try to get something down on paper. It's easier for the board to have a discussion. When we were at policy committee, we talked about how to space things out so that not everything was happening like in the same year. So there was a conversation about the tool that you would create with the new superintendent, whatever you call that, would be biannual. So the superintendent's first year, they would do that by fall. I remember conversations because when I came into Lebanon, there wasn't an evaluation and I asked for one. And so the conversation was, what's the time frame to do my eval? And we've done different time frames, but I think the ending point was to try to do the next superintendent's evaluation in get it all done in February before the new board comes in, so that the board's had an opportunity to work with that person. And then it's always really helpful to get information in February or March, because if you can do some changes, you're happy to do some changes. Then do kind of like a mid-update in June before the board leaves. It says, here's what I'm working on, and then swing it back around. This also, when we look at the one for the school board, I had the same timeline, so that as a board, you would be getting the superintendent's evaluation, their goals, their thoughts, and then you as a board are getting your goals, your thoughts, so that you're creating your next goals before brand new board members come on, where there's 3 or 4 or 5 that haven't had an opportunity to think of things. Perhaps you could consider moving your retreat to March or April, rather than waiting till the end of the school year. Once again, I'm not there, but won't be there, but these are things that I've thought about over the years, and simply wanted to clean things up for the next superintendent and hopefully for the board. I'm not weighing in on either, like, things are right or wrong. This is really your policy to present, but I just wanted to explain kind of what we talked about at policy committee and where I pulled the information from, and now it's up to you to do whatever you'd like to do with it.
So I think last meeting when you weren't here, I mean, this is good because this gives us a place to start. I think one of the things we talked about at our last meeting was in policy committee, you guys had discussed the biannual kind of large stakeholder survey, which I think you're calling part 2, right? Of this?
No, it's the
or is the evaluation?
second evaluation tool.
The second evaluation tool. So part 2, is that right? Or a second evaluation?
So part 1, 2, and 3 are all part of the current super eval.
I see. Sorry, there it is. I was like, where is it? All right, so farther down, I see that. So we had talked about, that's good, and I think that we had discussed, or at least in policy committee, you discussed that, and we had discussed that about doing that larger survey to all stakeholders, right? Is that what you're talking about? And so the thing that, the piece that we had discussed at our last retreat, that was the paper that I submitted to the board today, was adding, in addition to that, augmenting the process to add something, and it could be a survey, it could be a short answer, it could be an interview, whatever we decide, that questions the direct reports. So that would be building principals. We can decide who that is, but primarily it would be building principals, district admin. We could decide if we wanted someone else besides that, like like central office staff. But whoever that is, it would be optional and it would be anonymous, right? They would have the option not to take it, and they could fill it out anonymously. But it would be not the same as the big giant survey. And we could align it, which I think makes sense, align it with the domains in the super eval. So the specific domains that we evaluate the superintendent on normally, they would be the same domains that would be in this survey. It would be very short if we did it a short thing. Or could do an interview. Those are the 3 options that were in the sheet that I presented you. That, I feel like, should happen annually as opposed to biannually. Because it's more specific, because those people are working with her all year, or the superintendent, I think you're saying her, because you're the superintendent now. They are working with the superintendent all continuously, whereas the larger stakeholder eval, I think it makes sense for it to be biannually because it is a larger group of people. And that evaluation, that survey that goes out, who conducts that survey?
I've always had a third party do it.
Okay.
You don't want the board to do it.
Right.
And you don't want somebody in the SAU office to do it. That would be unfair for them to be asked to review the information and summarize it when they're in the same building in their report. But what I'm hearing is you want the new superintendent to do the super eval annually, which is about 40 pages of documentation. Then annually you want to have a survey that you'll create that's just for the district like basically the SALT team. And then biannually, you want the larger, like what you're describing, not saying the whole board wants it,
yes.
but you're wanting.
What I'm proposing is that, yes.
Yeah, another one. So I just wanted to be clear that this has 2 tools in it, you're describing 3.
Yes.
If the board does go that direction. I've found when I do the surveys for the principals, we do those surveys every other year. It allows an opportunity for reflection and growth before you send it out the next year. And it takes time to make changes and build relationships, and if it's just every year, it seems like that could be, they're constantly getting information without having a chance to pause and make a difference. Once again, it's completely up to whatever this board decides to do, and I'm happy to revise it however you'd like it.
What do people think? I guess that's the question I have.
I guess personally, I guess your camp is of the three. I think that might be a little bit of overkill to have this massive one done by an independent consultant and then also do like the essential of the SALT one anonymously. So I guess I'd rather determine what's the better value between getting a larger net feedback versus just the immediate leadership reports. I don't know, I'm kind of up in the air, but I do think that I agree with Joanne that I think that biannual would be better so that people can have a chance to change and grow, and that you're not constantly, because then as you're the person filling out those evaluations, it also makes it hard for you to step away and realize that the person may have grown and changed, because you're kind of always in that rapid cycle of remembering something that happened last year and maybe totally forgetting, okay, but 4 months down the road, this person did change their behavior and they did, they're doing a great job now based on the feedback they've gotten from their group.
But we do our evaluation every year.
Right, the board about this board evaluation and the super eval every year, yes.
Right, so how come that works, but other evaluations would need to be biannual?
Well, because I think, because I think super eval is more directed, right? So you're doing it more, it's on the strategic plan, the strategic goals, it's more of the strict day-to-day job performance, whereas on the other survey, you're trying to get more communication and leadership style, which takes more time to evolve, I think, and change, whereas the other ones are more task-oriented. At least that's the way I differentiate it.
I think, can I just interject a little bit based on our conversation and policy? I think when we were talking about the biannual piece of this, it was really, what happens is that Joanne has typically done a survey every 3 years tied to the strategic plan. And so we were thinking of, instead of, and in that survey, she also asked questions about board, about superintendent, and those kinds of things. So I think our thought about that survey was to sort of try to pull a little piece out and have it just be board, superintendent, and then have another survey that's also biannually be more specific to the strategic plan. Kristen, am I reflecting that correctly?
Yeah, I agree. We wanted to separate the strategic plan from the evaluation survey just to, they're two different things. But yeah, I think also just to the other point about super eval, the board evaluation, of course, we do it every year, but it's not the same kind of thing. It's the self eval and it's relatively low stress. I think the big question is, the super eval is it's a big commitment to do the self-evaluation on the part of the superintendent, and then the SALT team and the survey. I agree with MJ that it feels like that it's a lot of material, and we would have to think about, who's reading all of this stuff and how is the feedback being given and how is there going to be enough time to implement any kinds of changes. So I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know what the purpose of tonight is. Are we going to decide, or is this going to come to policy? I'm not really sure what the process is at the moment and where everybody stands. I don't know if people want to go around the table and give their thoughts. Yeah, let me know.
I think that to move the discussion along, that probably the best thing is to take a straw poll to see where people stand on the, I guess, the way I see it, as Lil proposed, there's the 3 evaluations. I think everyone on the board is in agreement that we keep the super eval tool. So really, we're down to, do we do a biannual and include that full larger survey on a biannual basis, or the targeted one more towards the SALT team, or some combination of both? So I think take a straw poll, and then I do think that the policy should go back to be reviewed and wordsmith through policy committee.
We, just as we're talking about this, before we do the straw poll, I think that's a good idea. But as we're talking about it, maybe what we can do is do them both biannually, but on opposite years, right? So that, I mean, really, like if we're doing we use SALT team, or whatever we want to call it, SALT team, short answer, we have to decide what kind of survey we want to do. But SALT team investigation, questioning, I don't know what the word is for that right now. SALT team feedback.
Investigation sounds harsh.
SALT team assessment. So SALT team feedback and assessment 1 year, and the next year, the full survey that we've been talking about, the full stakeholder survey. Now, that brings up Wendy's point, which is we've been, apparently in policy, they were talking about making that full survey be 2 different things too. So now it's like there's a lot of different surveys going on. So that was confusing.
So if I could help, what we talked about at policy was having a stakeholder, the full stakeholder survey biannually, of which you would check off, are you SAU, are you whatever. I have found people check off that box the wrong way, and it's very hard to pull that data, because people don't want to say they're at Mount Leb, so they'll click Hanover Street and things like that, and that top box never really counts. So you could do that big survey the first year, the superintendent's here. The second year, the new superintendent's here. Remember that they'd be doing the strategic plan survey, because that's going to be the year 3 for the next year. So you don't want to have multiple surveys on that 3rd year. So don't forget that every 3, you can actually look at the survey questions that were gone in the past, and you could possibly tweak them to add a little more things that you want to hear about from the superintendent. So you have 3 tools. You have the super eval every year. You have what I'd call the stakeholder survey every 2. And then on top of that, and let me know if my math's wrong, but every 3, you're doing a strategic plan one, which could also have some questions that you're referencing. So that you're not doing a double superintendent strategic plan, because people won't fill both out. And that's what we talked about at policy.
So then it seems like you just need to change the order, because if you say this is talking about starting next year, right?
Yeah.
So next year, you don't start with a stakeholder survey, you start with a direct report survey. Then the following year, you have a stakeholder survey that's about the strategic plan. You can decide if you want that stakeholder survey to also include the superintendent or not. I mean, we can structure that however we want to structure that survey. And then the next year, you're back to a SALT survey, and then you're back to a stakeholder survey. So it just means you're just flipping the order. You're not changing.
So hold on a second. I think we have 3 different things that are happening, but I think the intention of one of the things that the board put on its goals was to get a better and more thorough evaluative process of the superintendent by having other people besides the board evaluating. So what we're missing here is just a regular installment of information preceding the board evaluation of the superintendent, because you're talking top down and bottom up. They're not the same thing. A stakeholder survey is not the same thing as people who are reporting to the superintendent, feeding back information about how they feel about that person's leadership. And that is a very common and normal thing that happens yearly in a review cycle for one's job. at least in all the jobs that I've ever had, including in schools. So what I'm trying to figure out is how do we implement both the super eval, which is coming from the board, and the superintendent reviewing themselves as far as how they feel about how they're doing, and the information coming from the superintendent's reports. That's all we're saying. And that can be a very simple and clean process of a Likert scale that includes a 1 through 5, how am I doing, and then the opportunity to give comments. It doesn't have to have a person's name attached to it. It doesn't have to have high stakes related to what we're going to do with it when we get that information. It's just one more data point in order for the board to do a proper evaluation. That's all I'm seeing it as. And it doesn't need to be done every other year. It just needs to be done in a regular cycle, like HR does a review for every single person in, it's very normal. It's not something that is where we're trying to use it as a tool to make pressure. It's just a way of getting information. And it doesn't have to have anybody's name on it either. It can be a very neutral tool. So I don't know why it feels really hard to do, or people are really resistant to it.
So I guess how do you envision that, I guess then dovetailing with super eval? Does it happen at the same time, or does it happen before we then use the super eval information that was inputted by the superintendent?
It feels like we need it before, because a lot of the questions that are going on for super eval require some other data point besides just our personal opinion about how they're doing. I mean, that's not an evaluation. We can't possibly know how they're doing if we work with them very little.
Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I remember doing the super eval process, wishing I had more information on which to base my opinion.
Yeah.
And so had I had information from this sort of additional tool, I think I could have done a much better job in my super eval process.
Can I say something quick?
Yes, Wendy.
Jay?
Yes.
The timeline that I had initially created with Super Eval, and Super Eval does allow for a mid-year review, which would typically be around June, at the end of the school year kind of thing. So I'm wondering if that would be a good time to capture information from direct reports, so that we sort of have that information as part of our like mid-year cycle, checking in kind of thing. And then when it comes to the full evaluation or the final evaluation in March, February, March, January, then we can sort of incorporate that information in. And we can also sort of give that feedback to the superintendent. So between August and December, they have an opportunity to work on anything that might have come up over the last school year.
So are you saying that we give an evaluation without the feedback of the direct reports?
No, I think she's saying I kind of like, I think what Wendy's proposing is that you get the feedback from the direct reports in the middle of the evaluation cycle, which is at the end of, it happens to be the end of the school year.
Got it.
So then you have that information when you're asked to do the full evaluation in the January, February timeframe. And I actually think that's a good compromise personally.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of value in having this additional tool. And I think, going back to policy committee and having them work out the mechanics of it and the timeline and the wordsmithing, I think is a great idea, and then coming back to the full board. But I think there's a lot of value in this process.
I mean, I think we'd have to decide which of the tools, because there's several options, right? We'd have to decide which of the tools we want to do.
Of the three in the letter here?
Yeah.
So I think, I guess I go back to number one. I think Likert. Yeah, Likert. That seems like it's the least onerous to the staff. It's short and sweet, and you can get some valuable feedback that we haven't had. I mean, that's the other thing. I think that this is a process that is still developing, and we need to not take off more than we can handle right now. And there's opportunities to revise it down the road, but see how this goes and if it meets our needs, and then we can always change it, and policy committee can wordsmith it so that there's the flexibility to change it. It's just more that there will be a mid-year evaluation by the direct reports using a third-party survey of some type.
I wonder, I might have just lost my train of thought. But I wonder if we can pull the people, so if we identify sort of what is that direct report group, and then if we can pull them a little bit and say, because really what we want them to do is to complete the information. And when I was doing research sort of about getting feedback from direct reports, it suggested that you use a tool that the people are comfortable providing information. So I wonder if we said to that group of direct report, if we just sort of agree tonight that we want to do it, we want to identify the group of direct reports. We want to do it annually in about June, and then sort of pull that group and ask them what is the tool that they would be most likely to use, and how do they feel it would be best to relay information to us because the one thing that's touchy is if there's fear of any kind that there's going to be repercussion or anything like that, they're just not going to fill it out.
Well,
and
that's
so,
why, not to interrupt, but I think that's why it's important to have the anonymous third party that's collecting the information so that there isn't that fear of retaliation. I mean, that also is something that's done all the time. Yeah. In the corporate world, that a third party does it. They hold all the results, they tabulate them, and they make sure that it's anonymous.
I mean,
this is Kristen. Can I jump in for a sec?
Yes.
I was going to say the same thing that, the timeline in June, I mean, it sounds good to have a mid-year report. I would hesitate maybe June because that's end of year, and I'm sure for principals in particular, it's a very busy time. But that's not a big point. But yeah, I was just thinking like, how are we going to, so I'm assuming that the information is going to come to the board, but the information from these direct reports also needs to go to the superintendent. And then that's a question of like, how is that going to go? I mean, at the same time or later or whatever. So there's a lot of like small things that I have a question mark of how that would work. And but I just did have a question. Are we proposing kind of in general to do this every single year, or is that the point now? I mean, I see Lisa, you can see you guys, you can't see me. I see you shaking your head. But in that case, I would say June is a bad time, and we might want to think about making it a little earlier in the year, just because of graduation and
I think we
and
said
stuff.
the end of June, so hopefully, schools
they're
closed down, but they won't have students in school, right? So,
right. But they do a lot of their prep end of year. Yeah.
It's just
so
one
I
page
just
worth
know
of information where you give a number and you can literally finish it in 10 minutes. It's really not a big deal. And it could be put in an envelope with a person's name on it.
Electronic.
It doesn't even have to be an envelope. I mean, I think the thing too is I don't necessarily know that we need. We're talking about. I mean, how many people are on SALT, Tim?
About depends on who's there on a given day. Usually around 18 to 20.
Okay, so I don't even think it's going to be that many, right? Because we're talking about the 4 building principals. I mean, this is what Wendy was saying. We need to decide. So 4 building principals. Who would you consider the direct reports in the district office?
To the superintendent, there are the 4 building principals and the business administrator, the director of student services, and the director of CIA.
And human resources.
Oh, and the social worker right now. Human resources reports to me.
Yeah. The social.
I don't support the human resources piece at all for what it's worth.
Yeah, that's fine. And we
Especially
don't-
that time of year, it's
And we don't have
terrible.
to do that. So what I'm saying is, we're talking, so you just said 4, 7, 8 people, right?
I'm probably missing one or two, but yeah.
But
yeah,
max 10.
yeah.
So that's, if we do an anonymous survey, we use SurveyMonkey that tabulates all the information itself, it can come directly to the board. We don't even have to have anybody.
No, I think it needs to be handled by a third party, but I think to go back to the other question of how is it shared, I think that it would be shared the same way we do the super val now. We do it as tabulated, and then there's a meeting with the board chair and sometimes the vice chair with the superintendent. I envision that would be the same thing with just an end of the year check-in, and this is what,
I agree.
Kinda where the
I
results
think
are.
that works. I think my only concern with the third party is it's just an extra expense, and for 10 surveys, it seems like a big expense for 10 surveys that we can tabulate on SurveyMonkey, that will do it for us
You can make
automatically.
anonymous surveys on
Yeah,
Survey.
they're all anonymous, so that's just my thing. I just don't want to have to add, I don't want to add money to this process, because I don't think we need to add money to the process, so that's why I suggest that.
But I think, sorry, Lil, it's Kristen again. I'm finding it hard to think that we could do like a 10-minute survey on SurveyMonkey that has a lot of value. So I know maybe there's a lot of stuff out there, and you would really need somebody professional who knows how to write the right questions. I don't think the board should be putting together the survey necessarily, because there's probably particular questions we need to be asking. So I agree with Wendy that maybe we should, run this on some level by the SALT group or whoever we're going to be asking for information, and let them know it's out there. And if they have any feedback about what they think would be the best way to get that kind of information, and I would not be averse. I think it would be a good idea to have a professional and just say, if we want this information, then we should be willing to, pay somebody who knows what they're doing.
I think that's a good idea.
Aaron?
So we're trying to use this as a tool to evaluate based on what's in super eval. So these questions should be based on things we're looking for super eval. So I don't think it would be that difficult to pull questions based on super eval that we can share with these people that are going to answer or not answer, and then that's what we're looking for, though. I don't think we need a third party to come up with those questions.
I think we can safely walk away from tonight saying, there's interest in pursuing this as an additional tool, but clearly there's work to be done to figure out the format and
Right.
the timing and the participants, and that can happen in a different forum.
Right.
I think I would say we might need to walk away with a slightly stronger statement than there's interest in doing this, right? Because I think we do need to decide who are the people that we're targeting, in what way are we targeting them. I think we're sort of circling around a survey that can be very short, so probably option 1, Likert scale survey with questions like Aaron says, taken from the super eval domains. So I think we have to, that's maybe where the straw poll comes in. Like, do we all agree about that? And then, once we all agree on who those people are and what this format is, then it can go back to policy with sort of the blessing of whoever, us, and proceed from there. Because I think if we say, like, we're kind of on board, but, like, I think we need to be a little bit more concrete, seems to me.
So I guess I'll look to Mary, who's been quiet over there all night. We need a straw poll of where you stand right now.
I agree. I think the Likert's, maybe the Likert scale, but I think there should be some open-ended pieces. And I think the other thing is we have assistant principals, so I don't know that we want to leave them out. And I think we need to make sure that the superintendent gets the results in a timely manner, so that she can, or he can have time to work on whatever.
So I think the reason that I didn't think and haven't mentioned the assistant principals is because they don't report to the superintendent, right? They report to their building principals. So that's the only reason I haven't
I
mentioned
understand.
So I think that that's where the bigger biannual survey that is a survey potentially related to the strategic plan, related to the board, related to the superintendent, sort of a general survey, how are we doing as a district, and here are the 3 primary areas. You know, that would go to a broader stakeholder group, which would include staff, administrative staff, like assistant principals. It would go to community members, parents, blah, blah, blah. You know, so I think that will have a way, you know, similar to the questions that Joanne has already been asking, maybe. I'd have to look back and see what those questions are, but, you know, just broadly about how is the superintendent doing, how is the board doing, you know, what are your thoughts about the strategic plan? I mean, I think we still have a way to capture that, and that would be more of that biannual thing. And then have this direct report be the part of the annual eval, is my thought.
Sounds good.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I'm just, I think I'm kind of disinterested, although I'd be participating in the surveys. But, so I try to say this objectively, like, maybe some weight should be given. You guys should think about what sort of strength this has. Like, I would worry that depending on what kind of personnel action, maybe someone's really not doing very well, and so the superintendent says, you're not getting it done, and then that survey comes out, and they're like, man, this is the worst boss ever. Like, I worry about, this is one of the challenges with 360 reviews, frankly. Not that I'm afraid of anything my staff might say, but you're also beholden to someone's mood, and maybe they deserve to get disciplined or whatever it might be, and then the board finds out that this is the worst person ever, when really what was going on is that guy was being a terrible employee and got disciplined for it. This is hopefully never would happen, but I just wonder how much weight the opinion of the direct reports would have in your review, because 10's not a very big sample size, you know what I mean? No.
Aaron?
I would say, though, if you have 6 or 7 of that 10 that all have those same type of comments, maybe there's something there. But if it's one,
Yeah.
it's a one-off. Just like if there's one that says this is the best person I've ever met.
That one, when it's related to me, is true.
And I think it is. This is one data point, right? I mean, it's one of the domains, and we have on this list now. There's 10 domains, right, that we already evaluate them on. This is one piece in those 10 domains, right? So I think I agree with Aaron. I think, yes, is it possible that there are exaggerations on either side of the spectrum? Absolutely, this is humanity. But are we, as adults, able to balance that with the sort of the larger question of all of the other pieces of information that we have, the 40 pages of documentation and our own experience and this data point. So it's one of many, I think.
Yeah, I was just saying that a bell curve exists, but 10 people is not a very big sample size.
Right.
Are you saying that you'd like it to be going to more people? Is that what
No,
you're saying?
I think that you should take it as, I don't know how you're weighing all these things, but if I were me and I was on board, I would not want that to be a very significant amount of the total. If it's 100 points, maybe that's 10 points of it, or whatever, you know what I mean? That's all.
I think my perspective is, I agree with you, that's always an inherent risk with any survey that you submit to employees. My sense is this is just one way of informing us when it comes to our turn to then create an evaluation.
Yeah.
So it's just data points that all accumulate that go into the decision making. No one piece is more important than any other piece.
Well, I think too, sorry to jump in again, I think too, the way I look at the evaluation process in general is not sort of to reprimand anybody, it's a growth model. So you're looking for information on lots of different levels to help this person grow as an employee in the district. And so having a superintendent that is open to understanding how they're perceived by their staff, and trying to work on that relationship. I mean, they don't have to bend to everybody's whim, right? We all have different personalities, but I think to me, it more represents somebody's ability to be introspective and sort of working on building relationships and fostering trust. And it's just a tool to allow that to happen and to understand how you're perceived and how you're working with the people that you are responsible for every day, you know. So to me, it's I think, an important part of just that whole growth process.
So I guess it sounds like we're all in agreement that this should go back to policy committee to be revised and beefed up a little bit, and we want to continue with the super val, renew the commitment to, in particular, super val is more how the superintendent is executing on the strategic plan. In addition to then have a Likert scale survey of the select 10 or so direct reports of the superintendent at a time. I guess it's still to be determined whether it's the end of the year, but definitely before the super val comes into play.
Yeah, and like super eval, where you have, numeric values that you're picking, but there's also space to put in a comment. That way you end up sort of combining option 1 and 2. Right? You get the numeric value, which is an easy enter data point, but there's a way to express yourself if you want to provide additional information at your choosing.
I think that's important.
Okay, so hearing any disagreement, that's what we'll send it back to policy committee to finish hashing out the finer details and bring us back something to discuss more on CBI. Moving on, we have the first reading of policy BA, the school board self-evaluation and goal setting, which I think that must have just come up as part of this discussion. I don't think that had, correct me if I'm wrong, Kristen, but that one too has not actually been reviewed.
Well, there was a very basic one, I believe, but I think this is a new version. Sorry, I don't have my page open right now because I'm
I think it added a paragraph at the, it looks like.
Yeah, it just added a paragraph.
It added a paragraph, but.
It mentions super eval specifically.
Right.
So that's.
A renewed commitment to super eval. Oh, and I think it also put in deadlines for when the evaluations could be, because we've, due to various reasons, been a little lax about our deadlines, and I think the point is that it's important that the current board gets in all their opinions and completes their evaluation before we turn over to possibly a new board after the elections. Which personally, I think that is a good thing, because I know, having been a new board member coming on and then asking to do an evaluation when I've been on the board for less than a month was a little awkward.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really the only change, is just adding in that last little paragraph that specifies just what you said. So I guess then the next step for this, for BA, is to actually go to policy.
Right, I think that policy needs to go back and review now, as long as we're all in agreement that we have a commitment to complete SuperVal, and we're going to complete it in the timelines that are discussed, January and February, so we can have it done before the board turns over each March. Anybody disagree that we should hold ourselves to some timelines that are relevant?
It's appropriate.
Wendy and Kristen, do you have any objections?
I think the only other question, why it probably came back to us too, is this sort of goes back to how the board is also going to receive feedback from a survey. So do we want there to be something separate, like what we're talking about for an annual kind of thing with the direct reports, or do we want to be included as part of like that biannual strategic plan, superintendent, board survey kind of thing to a bigger group of stakeholders?
Well, I guess I think our only direct report is Joanne, and we probably know how she feels about us most of the time, the superintendent.
I think that was part of the additional part of that policy too, is it, are we going to, how are we going to seek feedback about our role?
Right, so I think that goes to that wider biannual survey, correct? So I agree, maybe adding a piece of that, but I don't think that having feedback from our direct report, I think we get that every 2 weeks on some level.
So Wendy, if I understand what you're saying, you're asking if we can add questions specifically about the board, specifically about the superintendent, and specifically about the strategic plan to that biannual larger stakeholder survey.
or to make sure that that's sort of what the purpose of that survey is, and group them sort of together in a way so that we're not sending out individual surveys, a ton of other surveys, sort of say, like, we're going to do a biannual thing. Because I think currently it's been done every 3 years. And I think that's the one where Joanne uses that third-party person to sort of gather all that information.
So Joanne, we're talking about the biannual survey and whether or not it's appropriate way to give feedback to the board of how the job they're doing is. Or can we include any questions about the board in that survey?
In the strategic one, there's questions about, that's the 3-year one.
Well,
That's the one that has, that I've been using an outside person to do it? Is that the one you're referencing?
Yes, I guess we thought it was biannual, it's not.
It's 3.
3, okay.
Because it connected it with the strategic plan, then it does talk about the board, then it does talk about the superintendent. And that's the one that Amanda Silver would come back, because it's really important not only to do the survey, but to publish it and to get the information out. But what we were talking about on policy was that one would continue to be a 3 because you need it to bounce your strategic plan. Then, and I'm sorry I had to step out. But then there would be the stakeholder one, and then tonight I guess you're going to vote as if there's a, I'll call it the SALT one too. So that's where I left, and that's where I came back, and I think that's where you are, right? Trying to figure out the pattern.
Well, so I guess while you were gone, so we did decide on it's not all of SALT, but it's your actual direct reports. So the 4 building principals and the building administrator, the business administrator. Sorry.
It's my COLT team, my central office leadership team.
Right, that. I didn't know there was another name. So, and that would happen annually, but that would not happen at the same time. It would happen before your superintendent before a superintendent eval happens. So at the end of the year, for instance, so mid-year of the evaluation procedure. So we haven't thought about when that is, but maybe May.
May, June, yep.
Yeah. And then now what we're talking about is the biannual that you mentioned.
Stakeholder with the Likert scale, the 3 pieces.
Yes, it is Likert with open-ended.
And interviews.
No interviews.
No interviews.
Just a couple questions.
Just a Likert scale with open-ended possibilities, so they can add additional information if they want, but it would just be, and it's anonymous.
All right, so your every 2-year one, you don't want to have stakeholder input?
No, we do. So we're two separate.
No, okay, so we moved that, so Will's trying to give an overcap of CBI, and so that's kind of where we landed on CBI. And so now we're talking about policy BA and how the board is also going to incorporate getting some more feedback on how they're doing from their stakeholders.
So we're asking if.
So I think,
go ahead, Beth.
Lil, I'm going to just jump in for a second.
Yeah.
So I think what we've decided is to do an annual direct report for the superintendent evaluation.
Right.
And that's one piece.
Yep.
And then we will do what it sounds like is a biannual survey of the larger stakeholder group.
Yep.
That will be questions related to superintendent and board.
Mm-hmm.
And then the strategic plan survey
Every 3.
every 3.
Yep. My question is, what components do you want for the biennial? Because I had proposed. I had proposed Likert. Sorry, we're in sync there, Wendy. I had proposed like a bit of a Likert and open-ended, and then people could talk to the person, the third party, if they wanted to, so you get more personal, reflective information every 2 years. I know interviews was a big part. It came up at policy and it came up here.
I think no one is talking about interviews anymore.
Yeah,
I think we've
No
moved
more.
past interviews.
My one concern about some of these surveys is that there's no stopgap that the same household isn't answering multiple times or the same family. And so I guess that's my only concern, because either you have, I guess to go back to the point of Aaron and Stephen, you have one really happy household that fills out the survey and thinks the board is doing great, the superintendent's doing great, or you have one very disgruntled family and they keep redoing the survey. So I think there needs to be, I do think that this particular one needs to be controlled by a third party, but I also think there needs to be some tighter parameters on it, that it's one input per household and then the link goes dead after you do it, so that we can get some valuable feedback and it's not diluted from the dad of the household answers it, then the mom answers it, and
But the other issue is the communication to get the surveys done, because right now, a lot of the survey input, it's very skewed because there's only a very tiny amount of survey respondents. And so until the system gets better for dispersing the survey itself, you don't get, I mean, the rule is that you have to have at least 14% respondents in order to have an accurate data set. So, and if we're going to do a survey, we have to have a process in order to get that information to us.
And I would say that I've used S'more, and S'more lets me know how many hits I get. And I get between 1,500 and 2,000 hits on the letters that I send, which means let's even use the lower number, 1,000 people are reading my S'more letters, 1,000 people are getting that link to do the strategic plan survey, of which I usually get 58 to 67 respondents. And so if you're getting hits of 1,000 to 2,000 and getting responses of 60, those are going to be the people that, it's kind of like a restaurant, right? If you're really happy or you're really not happy, and the people who think things are going fine, they're not going to take the time to do it, but it doesn't mean you don't put the effort in, and you try to get the feedback, and you say, we did the best we could. We gave opportunities for input, and that's what a board needs to do, for sure.
That's not, all I'm saying is that there's other systems for, and time periods for gathering data that can be more comprehensive, and there's ways to get more respondents. That's
Sure.
all I'm saying. And
Yeah.
so I think that if we could increase those numbers and increase the timeline that we're offering the survey, usually if you offer it for at least 3 weeks, and then you request it over and over again.
We
And
found, just so you know, you can see the data points, right, when people respond. So our district, over the years, have found that 2 weeks is it. That you're going to get a hit the first 3 days, and then I send a second one, and people are like, oh yeah, I should fill it out. And they fill it out. If they don't fill it out within those 2 weeks, they've either decided that they're not going to fill it out, or it's just, it's not a priority. So you can see the bars when you use the tools that we've been using that actually let you know, and it always has a spike. Then it goes down, and then there's like, oh, that's when I sent the next email, because it spikes.
But like a really good example is if you send out the survey alone without a newsletter, you will get much better feedback than if you're sending it out buried inside of the newsletter. So
Yeah. And that's what you could talk about when you actually get the tool created, because the work that's just going to be is doing that part. And I'm sorry, I came in to talk about, you asked me a question about BA, when to do the board evaluation.
not when to do it, it was what questions are in that biannual survey that we can use and incorporate into our board evaluation so that we're getting feedback from our stakeholders or
I can ask Amanda for a copy of what used to go out. I gave that all to her, right? Because she's the third party, so I didn't want any access to it. But I can find out what questions were in there about the board, and the board could add to it and tweak it. At least it's a starting point, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a good idea. I think a good starting point is that, but also looking at these two policies have these 9 and 10 domains listed of things that we're evaluating ourselves on and things that we're evaluating the superintendent on. So it seems like Erin was saying before, it seems like we would want to use those same domains when we're asking stakeholders questions, right? So ask questions in these specific areas so that we're all asking about the same areas.
Right. So I think what I'm hearing tonight is that we're in agreement that we want to beef up policy BA, continue our commitment to the super eval, but also enhance it with our own board feedback through an evaluation. Which we can tweak later, but that doesn't need to be explicitly spelled out in the policy. If anything, that's something we can discuss in a board retreat at the end of the year. So I think just policy BA needs to outline the steps that we're going to hold ourselves accountable to. And so that needs to go back to policy and execute on that language. Anybody have any other objections or any more feedback before we move on? Looks like policy has a few policies to look at. Glad I'm not on policy anymore. Okay. So it looks like we have to accept the donation of $4,926 from the American Legion to the LHS baseball for a bullpen fence and equipment. And
And we don't need a vote. It's an acknowledgement, I believe, Tim, right? Because it's under 5,000.
We don't need a public hearing, but with the new policy, I think we need a
A
vote now.
Okay, thank
to
you.
accept it.
And we are very grateful for this donation. I don't have much more information than that. Do you?
I am looking at an email stream about some things, and it's really what you see. The bullpen right now is, and always has been, sort of exposed to the outfield, and this would just provide some safety so you don't get beamed in the head when you're warming up. So the 4926 covers the cost of the fencing. So this is something the high school knows about, has been talking about. It's not in the budget. It's not. It's just a good way to get some safety without having to put it in the budget.
and there's room to fence off that space and doesn't impede on anything else.
Correct. I mean, I'm going off what Mike Stone's told me, yes.
So can I have a motion? Stephen?
I move that we accept the generous gift of $4,926 from the American Legion to the high school baseball for bullpen fence and equipment.
I second.
So that was a motion by Stephen, seconded by Lil. Any further discussion? Lisa? No? Oh, Lisa's ready to vote. Anybody on Zoom have any questions before we vote?
None.
Nope.
Okay, Lisa?
Yes.
Lil?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Wendy?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. The vote passes 8-0. And thank you very much to the American Legion for that generous donation. Okay, moving along to committee updates. Finance and Facility met on Tuesday, January 17th, with the next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, February 14th at 4:15 at the SAU office. Aaron, do you have an update for us?
Yeah, we talked about the renovation projects and how those are going. Everything's on schedule and looking good. As mentioned before, bids are due in February before our February 14th meeting, so we're looking forward to reviewing those bids at that time. We talked about a policy KFR, which was brought up by Tom. We looked at it, and there's some stuff we found that should be changed, and then Tim is looking over the pricing and stuff like that, and we're going to send it to policy committee to overlook it. Then we talked about Train possibly giving us a proposal for the boiler in the SAU to possibly compete with the one we have. There's more to follow on that. And then we set our next board meeting.
Okay, Policy Committee, the next meeting is Monday, February 13th at 8:30 a.m. at the SAU office. It doesn't sound like you've met between the
No.
board meeting, okay? So
No.
Okay. Education Committee, the next meeting is Monday, February 13th at 4:15 p.m. at the SAU office. P&N is standing down right now because all the contracts have been negotiated, pending approval by the voters. Student Wellness Advisory Committee, the next meeting is Wednesday, May 3rd at 3:15 p.m. at the SAU office. Hartford Area Career Technical Center, the next meeting is Tuesday, March 14th at 9 a.m. Area Committee, the next meeting is Tuesday, February 28th at 6 p.m. at LMS. And then the School District City Task Force, the next meeting is actually tomorrow, Thursday, January 26th,
Yep.
6 p.m. at City Hall. Do we have any future agenda items that anyone would like to discuss? To have put on the agenda? Wendy or Kristen? Anything?
MJ, I have a curiosity, and I don't know if this has to be an agenda item or just at some point it would be great to know what kind of emergency action plans we have around events or incidents that happen during athletic events. So where are our AEDs? How close are they to playing fields, especially outside? I'd be curious about that. I'd be curious to know if if the state of New Hampshire, NHIAA, or we require all our coaches to be CPR certified. What is, all that kind of stuff related to emergency events that might happen during athletic events.
I think some of that's probably addressed in the policy. One of them that was just approved, but maybe.
Tim said he'd look into it and we can bring it up at like FNF. I think that
Okay.
would probably be the right group.
Okay. So we'll look at it FNF and then bring it back as a report to the board. Anybody have anything else? Important dates for the district. The deliberative session is Saturday, February 4th at 9 a.m. at the middle school gym with a snow date of Monday, February 6th at 6 p.m. at the middle school gym. And then we have just a brief update on the superintendent search. Stephen was going to give us an update.
Yeah, so the search committee's been meeting regularly. We've been fortunate to receive a list of applicants with some really good quality applications in there. We have begun interviewing candidates, and we hope to complete the first round of interviews next week. And hope to come back with a short list of recommendations to the board in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you.
And Jay, I just have a calendar question for Joanne, maybe. It looks like our second February meeting is on the Wednesday of school vacation. So
It might have been, there were emails that went back and forth. I can't remember what the final date was on it, so I put an asterisk next to that to look into it too.
Okay. And then it looks like the voting day is actually not until the 14th, if I've got that correct, of March. So we'll have one March meeting before voting day.
Should have.
Yeah, that's correct. It's moved.
That's correct, a vagary of the calendar, yep.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Stephen?
To adjourn.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion to adjourn by Stephen, seconded by Mary. We'll have a roll call. Lisa? Would you like to adjourn?
Yes.
Lil?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Wendy?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so we are adjourned. Thank you very much for coming out on
And
this
Ray,
snowy night.
I would like to say thank you to the JAM videographers who were there with us.
Recording in
tonight,
progress.
During the snowstorm.
Record.
Thank you.